Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a highly controversial text from 2011 by an author named Xu Feng. The essay has a pretty bold title, Democracy is the Pursuit of Mediocrity. Now, regardless of where you personally stand politically, digging into texts that totally challenge our deeply held global norms, it's just a fascinating way to understand different worldviews. We are going to remain completely impartial here as we look at how this author forcefully argues against democratic systems and consensus building, and instead advocates for unilateral, dictatorial leadership across literally all areas of life. We're going to break down exactly how he builds this provocative argument, pillar by pillar, using the exact claims from his original manifesto.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The author establishes his core thesis right out of the gate using a twist on a famous traditional Chinese idiom. He states that three cobblers could never exceed Zhuge Liang. And if you aren't familiar, Zhuge Liang was this legendary, brilliant military strategist in Chinese history. But Xu Feng takes it even further. He claims that neither 3,000 nor 30,000 cobblers could outwit him. The fundamental premise here is that when absolutely critical decisions need to be made, a single individual with lofty vision and great strategy is always going to outperform the collective decisions of tens of thousands of mediocre minds. So for the author, democracy is quite literally just the pooling of mediocrity, which he claims inevitably leads to failure.
Section 1. Historical Evidence. The Mao Zedong Timeline.
To back this up, Xu Feng points to a series of specific historical instances where the party collective overruled or demoted Mao Zedong. He uses this to illustrate the supposed failures of collective decision-making. In June 1929, Mao was forced to leave his leadership post in the Fourth Red Army by a party congress. Then, skip to November 1931, he gets criticized by the collective and elbowed out of the Central Committee. By October 1932, he's pushed aside again, losing his post as political commissar. And finally, in January 1934, Democratic Party mechanisms rendered him just a mere figurehead, removing him entirely as chairman of the Central People's Committee. The author meticulously lists these dates to show what happens when a group of peers exerts democratic control over a single, highly driven visionary. And what does the author say the consequence of all this Democratic Party action was? Well, total disaster. According to Xu Feng, these collective decisions resulted in the gradual shrinking of red bases, a low tide in the revolution, and the ultimate destruction of the central base Mao had personally created. Because the visionary was sidelined by the group, the Red Army was forced into a desperate strategic retreat, the historic 25,000 li Long March. So by framing history in this very specific way, the author argues that collective, democratic decisions nearly destroyed the movement by neutralizing its singular leader.
Section 2. The Cosmic Order Model. Now, what's really interesting is how the text shifts gears from earthly history to his metaphysical view of how the entire universe operates. The text rigidly maps out hierarchies across every level of existence. Xu Feng argues that the whole universe runs on a unilateral system. To him, the basic model of the world dictates that every single domain has to have one unilateral decision-maker. In the universe, it's the greatest creator. In a government, the state leader. In a company, it's the boss. And in an orchestra, it's the conductor. He even quotes an ancient maxim, the sage embraces the one and becomes the model of the world. The text insists that any deviation from having a single one in charge defies the natural order of existence itself.
To drive home just how unnatural he thinks democracy is, the author uses this wild, super vivid analogy. Imagine, he says, if a cat or a dog suddenly became unconvinced by the cosmic hierarchy. What if they cried out demanding that the throne of the greatest creator be shared in turns, and that the ruler of the universe be chosen by universal democratic elections? Xu Feng states outright that if this were to happen, the universe would inevitably collapse and disappear. He's using this extreme analogy to suggest that demanding a vote in matters of leadership is as absurd and destructive as household pet trying to overthrow the laws of physics. He then bolsters this massive cosmic argument with a much more grounded historical quote from Napoleon, who famously said, "Nothing is more difficult and therefore more precious than to be able to decide." Xu Feng uses this to reinforce his assertion that only a single chief commander can ensure efficiency and order. It's that ability to make a final, absolutely unchallenged decision that holds a system together. And for him, that applies whether that system is an army, a business, or literally the universe itself.
Section 3. Who wants democracy?
Having argued that history and the cosmos favor the dictatorial one, the author directly asks, well, who actually wants democracy then? And here, he pivots to a pretty harsh psychological assessment. According to the source, the desire for democracy doesn't come from some noble desire for fairness or equality, but rather from personal flaws. The text explicitly lists 8 types of people who advocate for democracy. Let's run through them really quick. Irresponsible people, people with mediocre minds, those who scramble for power, people who do things stealthily, selfish people, people who want to shift responsibilities, people without definite views of their own, and finally, profiteers who want a share of the rewards without making any sacrifices. The text posits that democracy is essentially just a giant shield for these types of individuals to hide behind, allowing them to dilute their own accountability.
He summarizes this whole view with a stark, binary comparison. He claims that no matter how democratic a flock of sheep is, it can never resist a wolf. Similarly, no matter how democratically a group of mediocre minds operates, they can never match the vision and insight of a single saint. For the viewer trying to grasp his philosophy, this right here is the crux of it. A collective of the weak, or average, no matter how well organized by voting, simply cannot equal the raw capability of an exceptional unilateral individual. Section 4. The Life Chen Yuan Error.
So how does this controversial theory translate into practical organizational management? Well, in his vision for an ideal operational system, what he calls the Life Cheng-Yuan era, democracy is entirely absent. Instead, he introduces another traditional idiom. Like the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each one shows his or her special prowess. This describes a system where everyone has specific duty and absolute accountability over their specific domain. There is zero shared responsibility, there is only individual prowess applied to specific tasks.
The text lays out a very rigid 3-step playbook for management based on this concept. Step 1. Every undertaking, big or small, must be in the hands of exactly one strictly responsible person. Step 2. That individual makes all decisions within their scope. And crucially, the text states there should be no arguments, no debates, no discussions, and definitely no consensus. Step 3. Everyone else must cooperate fully and meticulously follow the exact requirements of that leader. The author firmly believes that sharing control between 2 or more people inevitably leads to low efficiency, massive resource waste, and endless mutual finger-pointing where no one is actually held responsible. And this brilliantly illustrates how the author views the very concept of consensus. In his framework, if a leader tries to use democracy, if they try to decide affairs through compromises and consolidations, it doesn't mean they are being fair. To Zhua Feng, it simply proves they are irresponsible and incapable. It proves they are wasting everyone's time, energy, and resources. Compromise, in this text, is mathematically equivalent to incapacity.
Section 5. The Tyranny Paradox.
But just as the author seems to have constructed this totally airtight, unyielding defense of dictatorial rule across history, the cosmos, and modern management, we get a massive, dramatic pivot. After pages of dismantling democracy and praising absolute, unilateral control, the author poses this exact, unresolved question to the reader. What should we do when a leader is self-willed, domineers their power, and exercises tyranny? It's the ultimate flaw in any dictatorial system, right? If the one ruler goes bad, the entire system is trapped, because all the checks and balances of democracy have been systematically removed.
And how does the author resolve this giant paradox at the very end of his manifesto? Actually, he doesn't. He simply writes, "I do not know. What do you think?" It is such a fascinating, abrupt end to such a confident text. He openly admits that he has absolutely no answer to the catastrophic downside of his own philosophy. We'll leave this provocative final thought with you to ponder. Is the risk of mediocrity in a democracy worse than the unanswerable risk of tyranny in a dictatorship? Thank you for joining us on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and we'll see you next time.